It's not every day that you and I get to hang out with a giant pumpkin grower on Spirit 1053, but today is that day. Cindy Tobeck from Tumwater, it is such a delight to meet you over the phone. How are you doing today?
I am doing great. I just got back from New York on a giant pumpkin mission.
Well, how cool is that? I think you're fabulous. Tell me, how did you fall in love with growing the biggest pumpkins and squashes in the world?
Well, when I was in kindergarten, my folks bought some land out here in East Olympia, and it used to be an old dairy farm. And so as they built the house and put in that very first garden, it just exploded. It looked like the Miracle Grow test garden. Giant pumpkin seeds that we put in got huge. They were like 150 to 180 pounds, which as a kindergartner, I thought these must be the biggest pumpkins in the world. And my dad said, no, I'm going to take you to the Puyallup Fair and I'll show you some really big pumpkins. And so he did, and I saw those and just knew someday that was going to be me. And so I held on to that dream for 25 years, clear through, my whole growing up and into adulthood until I could grow my own giant pumpkins. And I've been growing for 13 years now, and probably the last 8 very competitively. At first, it just started out as something fun, but now I'm one of the best growers in the world.
I mean, listen to what you just said. I'm sure that seeing all of your hard work pay off feels amazing. But when you receive that ribbon, what is that feeling in your heart like?
Oh, I love it. It is very satisfying because it's almost like having another child. And so when you grow 6 of them, it's like having 6 more children as far as the amount of work it takes to grow these things. And it's very satisfying. And not only do we, as growers, win at the weigh-offs, and I attend weigh-offs in Washington, Oregon, and California, there's also national standings that we can compare ourselves to with growers all over the world. So that's very satisfying too.
Your kids, your students call you the pumpkin queen. I mean, how impressed are they by your efforts?
Oh, they just are so impressed. They enjoy all the stories. When it was COVID time and I was teaching remotely, that actually was a lot of fun for me because I would take them to the weigh-offs with me. We would Zoom from the weigh-offs, and I was able to incorporate those things from my garden to the math lessons, even as we're measuring these different fruits of my labor and preparing them for weigh-offs. And so the kids love it. We've got a school garden here at East Olympia Elementary that I started when I first started teaching here. And so my class is kind of in charge of the garden, and they just think it's wonderful.
Wow. Now, do you name your pumpkins, Cindy?
I sometimes do name my pumpkins, and I always name my green squashes. The last few years, I've been specializing in giant green squash. This year, I grew the biggest squash in the world. I also did last year. I named it the Green Genie this year. Last year, it was Terremoto Verde, which is Spanish for the green earthquake, because I was taking it down to California where they get a lot of earthquakes. And I contended that it was going to be number one and it was going to rock the scales in California.
You're just a hoot. How do you transport your pumpkin children to these weigh-offs and competitions?
That's the trickiest part, is loading them out of the garden. Getting them out of the garden, you have to harness them up with it's called a pumpkin lifting ring. It's like 8 straps of seatbelt-like material with a steel ring on the top. And so you harness them up nice and tight. And then I use a tripod, a very high tripod. It's like 15 feet with an engine hoist at the top. And I use that to lift the pumpkin into the air. And then I back my truck between the legs of this tripod with pallets in the back and lower it down into the back of my truck. Once I get to the weigh-offs, they can unload them with forklifts. But getting them on the road is so much fun. As long as I'm showing the pumpkin locally, like in Oregon or Washington, I don't wrap them. Let the people on the road, on the freeway, see the giant pumpkin, because they go crazy when they see some upwards of 2,000 pounds driving down the road on the back of my truck or on my trailer.
I mean, that is just fantastic. Okay, so most of us aren't going to be growing pumpkins, Cindy, but we're going to be picking them. What's the surest sign of a healthy pumpkin?
The surest sign of a healthy pumpkin is when you pick it up by the stem, that stem stays on. If
Ah.
it comes off, if it pops off when you pick it up, then that means that pumpkin's already starting to rot. Not going to last as long.
Okay, so good. Cindy Tobeck, the Pumpkin Queen, thank you for hanging out with us on Spirit 1053. You're a delight.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too, dear.